Hello, this is Cassandra Arnold, and this is the second mini art school project that I'm doing for week 4. It's from the White Space is Not Your Enemy text, page 67, specifically the White website compare. And so that involves looking at the visual communications of two organizations that compare. I interpret that in terms of similar missions, similar goals and objectives, or similar audience, with specific analysis of the grid structures. So I decided to look at the websites of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Salomar Guggenheim Museum. Both of those museums are internationally known for their exhibition of famous artwork, as well as the architectural details of the buildings in which the artwork is housed. So each website aims to attract patrons as well as potential visitors, tourists coming and visiting New York City, and trying to entice them to attend upcoming exhibitions and shows, special events, as well as have recurring foot traffic for some of their regular programming and regular services. So without further ado, this is my website compare. So this first website, of course, is the Metro. So the first website is the Metropolitan Museum of Art, or more commonly known as the Met. Initially, there doesn't appear to be any grid structure at all, but what I do like about this is its use of the negative space and highlighting the artwork, specifically focusing on the artist, which is why patrons and visitors tend to want to go to these museums. They first want to see, well, what is the enticing artwork that's on display here. So even though there isn't a grid in particular in the main area here, aside from the headings here in the upper menu bar, you do have a great focal point. You're automatically drawn into the piece of artwork, and then they're using the very significant text here with a nice contrast to the saturated red background. So you can identify immediately this is the artist and this is the art period. And it's, they definitely use a very dynamic image. So the focal point is very clear, even though it's not a grid structure. But interestingly enough, there are multiple exhibits that typically go on at the same time, and this is how they highlight that using the multimedia, which I think is really great. The flash transitions. And so they're still using focal points. They're still using the text feature here, highlighting the focal point is definitely the art. You're drawn to the art, but then they use the nice contrasting color and the bold um, to identify who the actual artist is. And I think that works well. And especially this one, where actually the artwork is not front and center like the other two, but Rodin is very, very popular in traditional classical art circles. So you're immediately drawn to the name and the image, and it kind of is a very nice subtle aspect of sculpture. So you're still drawn in, even though it's also different exhibits, and so it's showing the variety. You saw examples of classical, you saw examples of more historical, you saw examples of modern art as well, and they're still using, despite the different types of art, they're having a very consistent, clean use of, saturated focal points in the artwork, but then very subtle but direct notations in the text, which I like. Then as you go further along the website, you'll see another interesting feature. After all the artwork, they tend to highlight the Met store, which I think is honestly a hidden secret. I often get a lot of nice presents here that are art themed, but easy on the wallet. And so I think that's why they want to focus that up in the upper part of the website. Then as you get away from the art and you scroll down to the homepage of the website, you see, I think, a more traditional grid structure, which is still leveraging those aspects up above. It's very clean in terms of the use of the font. The font is very consistent, and so it's not, but not too overwhelming. But they definitely highlight the areas that they want to highlight. And I like the use of spacing in between the different sections. So this next section is obviously they want you to come visit. So after you've seen all these nice focal interests, they're using this highlight here, but it's still consistent in terms of the size of the text and everything like that. So they're using the highlight really well. And again, the spacing very well. They're letting you also know about there are actually different Met locations. So if you're not near Fifth Avenue, you have all these other areas and being very precise about the time. And then they also are, this is another, it's still very orderly. It's still in a grid format, but as you can see, the borders kind of bleed over, but there is enough contrast for you to realize that you are going, you're looking at different like options and opportunities to do different things here. So I feel like they put in a lot of information in compact space using the grid structure in a very orderly, consistent way. And then they also have here your more standard services and things like that. Also, I feel like because they're using a very clean grid format, you're focusing more on, well, what the actual activity is rather than being drawn in by visual effects and things like that. So you see that, you know, this is a blog, which is a multimedia aspect. And initially I thought, well, highlighting some type of multimedia item, you might want to put more color, more emphasis on that actual heading. But then, you know, you're naturally more drawn to what is the actual subject matter for that blog and not necessarily the fact that, you know, it's a multimedia medium. So I kind of like that. It's orderly, it's easier to follow, it's a good clean flow. Um, and you still get a whole lot of information. So contrast that aspect with the Guggenheim Museum. The Guggenheim Museum as well, they want you to focus on coming to visit their um, various exhibits. So here they start out also with an image of the exhibition, their most prominent exhibition that they want to promote. However, they still have it as kind of like they have a lot of margin space here on the outside, which I thought was a little different. It's not as saturated, not as bold, and not as prominent as the Met. And as you scroll down, you have the heading. It's talking about the salons in Paris, which I think maybe that's why they might have wanted to focus on the actual museum space as opposed to the artwork itself, because going to a salon, I guess it's you're going into the environment as well as just looking at the artwork. And they're focusing on buying the tickets as well, right up front. So I guess this particular exhibition requires special tickets. However, I do find there was a lot of text. There really isn't a grid flow. There are definitely, as you can see, sections within the website. Like you have this first part that talks about the salon, and it actually now starting to turn into an article, which I thought was a little you know, starting to the eye. I was like, I thought I wanted to see more about the art, and then you have a lot of this right margin here that's not necessarily aligned well, so it looks like, you know, an essay that kind of needed more formatting. What I did like here, you have this standing text box, and what's good about this is that it's alerting the viewer to a special circumstance. So even though you have a lot going on with, you know, a lot of the text and the images and the buying the tickets, they're keeping this pretty consistent to draw attention to the fact that there's a special circumstance that you need to be aware of. So even though there's not a defined like column or grid, I think they use that part of the space pretty well. You know, so then there's more text, which I think it distracts. And also the formatting of the text, I think, is very different. You have these fonts, and then you have this block text, and then you have this color font, and then you have these images here. So I actually think that's a little bit distracting, even though it seems like now they're trying to put things in a columnar spaces. So it's like you have a bigger plane, then you have these little mini grids within it. And I actually thought this was a break to yet another exhibition, but it's still actually another part of the same exhibition. It's still talking about the salon. However, the difference is these are poems. So it seems like they added a multimedia where some type of audio feature where you can actually listen to some of the poems for which the artwork was based on. And I think that's kind of interesting dynamic. You know, you're it's definitely more interactive and it might want to draw you in because maybe, you know, the matte colors of this doesn't really draw you in like you saw some of the other artwork from the Met, but then listening to the poems that it's based on, it might make you more interested. And it's like another element to the same exhibit is actually buying the catalog. So they've actually highlighted that. And then they've also highlighted you can do like a virtual tour of the actual rooms where the exhibit will be shown. So I thought, you know, that's where it made me believe, well, maybe that's why there are more images of the room rather than just the artwork, 'cause that's part of the experience. So it seems like their website is more of an interactive experience before you even get to the museum, which is, I think, another way you might want to promote your art or the art experience. And again, similar to the Met, they have further down, you have other options and opportunities for additional exhibits and additional services to identify that. So below they have the more standard and additional and recurring services towards the bottom. And again, it seems like these follow like a columnar pattern. And so it's different, very different. And I think maybe that's intentional. Maybe the Guggenheim approach is to be a little bit more interactive and to use a little bit more of the multimedia, not so much your standard grid structure. But, you know, they're different museums, although they're both very famous. So that's my grid analysis.